Welcome to Jewish Action, the podcast. My name is Rabbi Gil Student, and this episode we will be discussing the winter 2025 issue of Jewish Action, the magazine of the Orthodox Union. You can find the magazine on jewishaction.com, where you can also subscribe. This issue of the magazine celebrates the 40th anniversary of Jewish Action. Tragically, the celebration is mixed with sadness, as we also commemorate the passing of Rabbi Moshe Hauer Zatzal, the Executive Vice President of the OU, our leader, our teacher, and our friend. In this episode, I speak with Rabbi Yaakov Glasser about our memories of Rabbi Hauer. Rabbi Yaakov Glasser is a prominent leader and educator, known for his dynamic teaching and far-reaching impact across the Jewish world. Rabbi Glasser is the managing director of communal engagement at the OU, where he provides vision and leadership to strengthen Jewish communities throughout North America. In this role, he worked very closely with Rabbi Hauer. Earlier in his career, Rabbi Glasser was the international director of education for NCSY and the regional director of New Jersey NCSY, where he shaped youth outreach and educational initiatives that inspired thousands of Jewish teens across the continent. He played a leading role in innovative programs, including National Yarchei Kala, widely regarded as transformative for Jewish students. Rabbi Glasser also previously served as the David Mitzner Dean of the Center of the Jewish Future and University Life at Yeshiva University, where he oversaw educational and leadership initiatives linking Torah learning with communal service. In addition to these organizational roles, he's a rabbi of the Young Israel of Passaic Clifton, where his stewardship has fostered a vibrant, diverse community, and he lectures widely on Jewish thought, Torah values, and contemporary challenges. Before we begin, please take the time to follow this podcast and to follow Jewish Action on social media. That helps us reach more listeners. Thank you for your help. And now we go to the interview. This is the first podcast we're recording after the Ptira of Rabbi Moshe Hauer, Zecher Tzadik Livracha. And the issue is we quickly, thanks to our crack team of editors, led by Nechama Carmel, quickly changed everything up so we could have a Bakavadik section in memory of Rabbi Moshe Hauer. This is not all we're going to do, as you know. We're also going to put out a commemorative book,
Right.
and a special issue of Jewish Action in addition to the regularly scheduled issues of Jewish Action. So it's a lot of work, but we believe it's a work of love. We believe this is what Rabbi Hauer would really want us to do, and we're
Absolutely.
happy to do it.
I remember many times Rabbi Hauer reflecting on his feelings about Jewish Action, because we would sit and talk about different issues, and he would cite Jewish Action volumes as almost Maramakomos. I think they wrote about this in Jewish Action. They wrote about this in Jewish Action. And he told me once that in the Hauer home, there is a massive stack of old Jewish Actions, I guess an archive of old Jewish Actions, and he and his wife who gives parenting classes and all sorts of things, and I'm sure, all sorts of teaching as a rebbitzin in the community, that he and his wife will often consult articles, which you understand, that means that they have the articles indexed in their head, which is not surprising, as sources of wisdom and reflection and understanding and perspective on whatever topic they're addressing. And he felt very passionately about the value and the impact of Jewish Action, because he felt that it wasn't just a magazine that was appealing to people's, general lifestyle, but was really struggling and contending with the issues that defined Jewish life. And it was relevant, it was resonant. And I would say, as he came into the OU, it was one of the things that he brought into the OU that he was the biggest fan of, in the OU, other than, of course, community engagement. But, but he felt very, very passionately about Jewish Action.
I wish I knew as much about Jewish Action as he did.
Yeah.
But in all my conversations with him, even before I came to the OU, it was clear that he viewed Jewish Action as an important method to communicate, to inspire, and to educate the community. And we've actually done studies on this, and we found that more than 50% of OU members, however you define that, read Jewish Action, which means Jewish Action is the best way for management to speak to our own community.
Yeah. Look, and he used to write some just beautiful, articulate essays and works in the magazine that conveyed what he was thinking at the time. I remember sometimes reading his articles, and these were ideas that were coming up in meetings and convenings and different things. And then, like, this is where he would kind of pull it all together and express it to the community using Jewish Action as a platform. He spoke often of the platforms of the OU, the ability of the OU to communicate not just through programming impact, but to communicate messaging to the community, to communicate ideas to the community. And anytime we would gather, we would convene a group around a particular issue, which is something maybe we'll talk about a little bit more in detail later. On the top of his list of what the follow-up opportunities are, he would always say, "And we could have a Jewish Action article about this." People would be like, "Okay." It was like always on the top of his list as a platform. Like if something was worthy of sharing with the community, not in a soundbite and not in a reel, as a developed idea, then this was his go-to space.
Right, and that's so important because it's not just a Dvar Torah, and it's not just let's tell people what we want them to do. It's really a developed idea, an argument, a thought process. Let's talk it out and convince people. And that he saw that. I mean, he viewed himself as a teacher of Torah, which is what he did for most of his life. And even when he came to the OU, he always wanted to be teaching Torah. He was changing the world through many ways, but deep down, he wanted to teach Torah, and Jewish Action was his one of his main ways of doing that.
100%. I would I would share the following. One of the aspects of Rabbi Hauer that made a very deep impression on me is in my own career. So I've worked for thought leaders in the past, and I've worked for people who we would describe them not as much as thought leaders, but more transactional, more action oriented, more pragmatist type people in the past.
Get it
Hauer,
done, get it done. People just get
exactly.
it done.
People, let's just get it done. Rabbi Hauer was remarkable in that he was a combination of both of these. We would often, convene around an issue, and the last thing he wanted to hear around the table was best practices. He would even mock that category a little bit. The last thing he would want to hear around the table with Rabbanim was divrei Torah. He didn't want to hear a chaymer ledrush. He didn't want to hear some vart you have that kind of, because it got in the way of what he thought was the opportunity to reflect together, to analyze together, to conceptualize together, and to think together about, what is the nature of the issue that the community is facing? What are the inner dynamics that are responsible for it? And how can it bigadol be approached and engaged in a thoughtful, substantive way? And he would referee the conversations in that direction. Sometimes we would have one of these gatherings, and in the middle during lunch, instead of us eating, Rabbi Hauer would pull the staff into a separate room and be like, "This is going terrible." And I'm like, "What do you mean it's going terrible? So engaging. Everyone's talking. We're getting great ideas." He's like, "Everybody's just sharing what they're doing. We have to get into the essence of the issue." He was a thought leader in that regard. However, this is a huge however. Once the convening was done, he wanted it to be a space of thought leadership, but he did not believe in just thought lemon thought. He believed in Jewish
Action,
action.
action.
He believed in doing something, and he always wanted to know, what's the follow-up? What's the follow-up? What's the follow-up? And, that was like, and if you didn't have follow-up to report, you felt this sense from him. You felt this sense of, what do we do here? Then why do we convene everybody? And you're like, what do you mean, why do we convene everybody? To think, like you wanted them to think. And it took me a while to understand that he was just this remarkable combination of these two dimensions. And it was a very, meaningful and substantive and special thing to be a part of.
See, I found that every meeting I had with him at the end, we just review what are the next steps. Which at first I thought, okay, that's normal. That's how you do it in a corporate environment. And then at some point I realized he didn't come from a corporate environment. It
Correct.
wasn't just that's how you end the meeting. It's the
Correct.
whole meeting was completely useless to him
Correct.
unless you had follow-ups and next steps.
Correct. He was here to make a difference and to make an impact, and he wanted us to be animated by that sense of mission, to make a difference and to make an impact. But he couldn't stand superficial impact, and he couldn't stand, like, kind of like diluting yourself into believing you're making an impact when you're not, or in exaggerating the intensity of that impact because you just want to either get credit or check a box or report up to a manager. He was very real and very authentic. What are we doing, and what kind of impact is it having? And that was just a huge piece of working with him and working for him.
And when you didn't, he would respond with some sort of humorous, critical, biting
Yes,
comment
yes.
just to people don't talk enough about his sense of humor.
Oh, he had an amazing sense of humor. I think it was one of the things we enjoyed with each other, and countless puns, um, sometimes even, like, sharp, from another direction. He was hilarious, but I think the reason why people don't talk about it is because, again, like, this polarity. When he was serious, his level of seriousness was beyond and deeper than most people. Like, he could be lighthearted and funny, but, like, on the other side of the spectrum, sometimes you just felt he carried on his shoulders and in his soul such a heavy sense of achrayus, and that was so serious. And so, like, if you he's not one of these speakers that you're like, "Oh, that's a funny speaker."
Right.
Like, if you could hear him for an hour and walk out feeling like, you just listened to, like, someone who has an immense appreciation for, the level of seriousness of the world and of life and of Klal Yisrael, and then you could be in a totally different environment and, he was just enjoying and having a good time and having fun. We enjoyed each other very much. I miss him very, very, very much.
When I look back at my WhatsApp messages with him, I only worked with him maybe 5 months, and we were still getting used to each other, but I can't tell you how often it was I misunderstood a joke that he said as something serious. I'm like, "I'm working on it," and he's like, "No, no, no, no."
Yes, yes. It's funny you say that. My very last WhatsApp from him is a joke I don't understand. And I'm embarrassed to ask someone. I think it's a sports metaphor of some sort, but I think I had sent him my Yom Kippur drasha, and he had sent back, some thoughts or some reactions, positive reactions, and then he wrote something afterwards, and again, this is a little part of it. He was brilliant, and you had to keep up, and it was kind of like, if you weren't totally keeping up, like, you were embarrassed to reveal that. So I was like, "Oh, yeah, that's totally," I have no idea what you're talking about. We enjoyed, like back and forth with each other very much. He could yeah, he could enjoy life. He enjoyed life.
Okay, so I have a few questions prepared. Why don't we go through the
Sure.
questions? So when you think about your day-to-day work at the OU, can you recall a specific moment when you felt, "This is what it means to work with Rabbi Hauer"? Like, what happened? What did it show you about him?
Sure. So I have experience. I want to say experiences. My head is saying memories. I don't want to think about it that way. Yeah. But I have experiences that are on the micro level, but I want to share one on the macro level. Everyone knows that the OU got involved in a campaign, not involved, led a campaign when we hit 180 days of the hostages in captivity, of bringing 180,000 letters to the White House. And this was like on CNN. It was a major, major deal. It involved the whole community. It involved schools and shuls. It was a massive campaign. This giant moving truck showed up. We all went. We met with the liaisons to the White House. I mean, it was remarkable. So I had the privilege of being on the Zoom when this idea came from Shemayim. And what happened was myself and Rabbi Motzen and Rabbi Hauer were all on a Zoom together to think about, what should we do as an organization? The hostages were a big part of what was on our minds and in our hearts. Rabbi Hauer got us together right after October 7th. The whole don't know if it was the whole organization or everyone in a management role. And his message was that basically we have to position this as, primary to our focus and our thoughts and our emotions and our action, but it cannot in any way replace or supplant everything else we were doing.
Here's a new job. Don't stop your
So
old job.
exactly, but he was very clear about that. Like, and it would come up practically, like we would bring a rabbinic mission to Israel and, during the war, and he would be like, "Why do you need 3 staff members? Why only take 2 staff members?" And he didn't mean financially. Josh brought that up. But what he meant was, like, who's gonna take care of the Rabbanim of America while you're all in Israel on this mission? Like, that's what he meant. Like, don't stop what you're doing. So we would have a lot of these, like, extra meetings to try to figure out how could we layer things in. So we were on this Zoom, and Rabbi Motz and I were throwing out different ideas. A Yom Tefillah, a campaign of Tehillim, a learning program, like all of the, a chesed effort for Eretz Yisrael, match with a soldier, and we were just talking and talking. And Rabbi Hauer, he was just kind of like sitting there, and he had like a contemplative posture that those that worked with him and knew him well, like where you knew that like he was kind of listening to what you were saying, but he had already kind of put you in a box that these are small ideas. And I could see, like, the wheels, like, turning in his head, and he wasn't saying anything, and he was being very distant, and, we were just trying to more things, see what stuck. It was a brainstorming session, and all of a sudden, we're like, "Okay, which of these things do you wanna do?" That was, like, my role, the managing director, so, like, like, let's go to Tachlis now. We have a list. Which of these things do we wanna do? And there was silence, and Howard leaned forward and he said, "What if we," very softly,
Yeah.
"what if we send 180,000 letters to the White House?" And Rabbi Motzen and I are like, "What if we went to Gaza and rescued the hostages?" Like, what do you mean? What are you talking about? Like, what, And then he started to build the idea further, some of which I'm not going to share, but he, you know, and he just basically challenged us. He's like, "Tell me why we can't do this. Like, we're the OU. We'll ask people to do this. They'll hear that it's important. We'll explain why it's important, and 180,000 people will write letters." And to him, it was about the advocacy for sure, but it was about 2 other things that he felt were very important. Number 1, and he felt this way about the rally as well, that the people in Eretz Yisrael should see that this is not just on our minds, but this is in our life. We're stopping what we're doing collectively. We're writing and delivering these letters. And number 3, he felt like it created an opportunity for people to do something. And he felt strongly that while the learning was great and the davening was important and all these things were very central, that a lot of people needed an outlet that resonated more with them and as a more active outlet. And he put this out there, and instead of saying like, and so I of course started texting Rabbi Motzen like offline on my phone. I'm like how do we get out of this? Like, what, this is crazy. This is, like, and Rabbi Hauer, like, you could see like it had been toe-face and it's still going. And then he looks at me and he goes, "Okay, I'm gonna bring it to Josh, and I'm gonna discuss it with Josh and with Mitch, who's the other executive vice president of the OU and the president of the OU." And the next thing we knew, we walked into the office the next day, and like half the place had been galvanized towards this. And the next thing I knew, a few weeks later, whenever it was, maybe it was even shorter. I think we did it in a very small period of time. They built a website, like, and we were standing in the White House where they put us in room 180 on purpose,
Right.
to like message to us that like this was real. And a group of us were just like delivering these letters. And I'm standing there in the White House thinking about this Zoom that we were on and how for Rabbi Motzen and I, like our hasagas were just normal. And Rabbi Hauer's hasagas were just so global and klal oriented. And, to me, I'm not saying that we could do that in every aspect of our work, but what it meant to work with Rabbi Hauer was to be expansive in your hasagas, in your categories, in your boundaries of what you imagine to be possible. And and he had not just an entrepreneurial spirit, but he had in specifically in the space of just not feeling constrained by
By
reality.
reality.
Like by reality. We were just like, how are we gonna print all these letters? Like, what does that mean to like someone had to figure out to put up a website, someone had to figure out how we're gonna get it out there to everybody, how we're gonna print out and deliver. And like, who said the White House is gonna accept 180,000 pieces of mail from us? Like the whole thing was just and it just everybody felt drawn in to this vision and this and that's what that taught me. And for me, I try very hard in how I carry things forward to ask myself, are you thinking big enough? And not big enough like a program needs to be large with lots of people and lots of money. Are you thinking big enough in terms of the needs of the Jewish people and in terms of the impact on the Jewish people? And that was very special. I don't know how that came from someone who was a pulpit rabbi in Baltimore. I really don't. Baltimore is a beautiful, big community. But like it was in him that he had these hasagas for what it means to be part of Klal Yisrael.
I remember when I saw the notification. I was not at the OU at the time.
Right.
I got one of these emails. I'm on the email list, and I was just thinking, who in the OU is going to be sitting there writing all those letters? 'Cause how you get 100,000 people to do it?
Right.
Double B'Shefin is going to be sitting there typing all day.
Exactly. Exactly.
I don't know.
They figured it
It,
out.
it's
Yeah.
it's visionary in the sense that it's not the standard things that we do. We have sort of a list of possible ways to engage the community.
Right.
This is just completely outside the box
Yeah.
and completely bigger than anything we would have suggested.
Yeah.
1,000 people saying a Perek Tehillim, I would have thought, wow, home run. 180,000 people writing letters? I wouldn't have even.
I want you to know there were big ideas that didn't work. There were. I don't want to talk about them. Some of them were my fault. Some of them were not. And when they didn't work, he didn't get down. I mean, at least not to us. He just looked at the situation and said, let's try to understand why they didn't work. And he moved on. But his cheshek, his desire, his aspirations for those bigger ideas to work always outpaced his pragmatic sense of like what's possible. And so there were, huge moments of great success, and it's okay. There were also things that didn't work.
So your portfolio is communal engagement, running programs to help individuals and communities. Can you describe a project, or let's say a crisis, that you and Rabbi Hauer navigated together that changed the way you think about communal leadership?
Sure. One of the ways that Rabbi Hauer would approach crises, I mean, there are transactional crises, like something happened in the Jewish community that needs a response. And those Rabbi Hauer would navigate through identifying who the experts were in that space. Sorry to be a little vague, but some of these crises involve people who I'm sure are listening to this podcast. But when there would be a crisis, let's say in a community or with regards to a Rav or something that, was in our space. So Rabbi Hauer, the first thing he would do is he would assess, okay, who are the expert voices that could contribute to dealing with this crisis? So we had a crisis that involved something technological. It wasn't an OU crisis. It was a crisis in a community and something potentially compromising. And Rabbi Hauer called the head of cybersecurity for, the National Security Administration and found out who's the expert in this aspect of, technological, so number one, he always went to experts. He also would go to experts in Torah, and he would consult both Gedolei Torah and he would consult Gedolei Torah that had expertise in those spaces. And he would consult Gedolei Torah across the spectrum of the Jewish community. I don't know if they would appreciate me sharing exactly, who they are, but I definitely sat in rooms with Rabbi Hauer when we had to deal with a crisis where there were voices sitting together that only he could convene.
Yeah. Yeah.
And as a result, you had such a multiplicity of vantage points and such a rich sense of, understanding. And as much as he was turning towards them, they kept pushing it back to him, like, what do you think? You're the expert, But he didn't just like ask a shaila, he would present it all and then kind of encourage this. Pilpul chaverim was a favorite term of his. And, he would encourage them to talk about it with each other. And from there would emerge a sophisticated and thoughtful solution. So those were kind of like I would say the crises, that like a crisis of the moment. In the more like pronounced, I would say, underlying crises of the Jewish people, like attrition, people who are leaving the Jewish community. So he had a very methodological approach. The first thing he did was study it, and he would use the CCR, which is a department in the OU, to do a study. What is the singles experience? In our community? What is the single mother's, what are the challenges that are unique to the single mother in our community? Why are people leaving Orthodox Judaism? And the part we haven't gotten to yet, how many are leaving Orthodox Judaism from the different, he would study it and he would work with people of, eminent ability and capacity in terms of their sophistication and credentials, sociologists, like real serious people, because he wanted to see data. And he wanted to move forward with data. Once he had that data, so his favorite thing to do was to convene. Convene. We have to convene. And, and we would often go back and forth. I would be like, should we have some goals for the convenings? Should we have like a schedule for the convenings? Should we have like from 11 to 3, and he would just be like, when really good, smart, thoughtful people come together, you'll see good things will come. And he would convene, and he had a very expansive sense of who to convene. And he would bring people together, and he would contribute his own ideas, and then he would have it go around. He wasn't like a facilitator, sometimes we could have used a facilitator because often we were convening like big Jewish leaders that had a lot to say, and it would take a while. But and from those convenings, like we would look at the data. He would always require them to read these studies in advance of these convenings, and he would be strong about it and feel like, if we're going to spend time together addressing this issue, Klal Yisrael, should at least read the executive summary. That's what he would, expect, of people. And sometimes people didn't do it. And Rabbi Hauer had enormous restraint in terms of getting frustrated with people. But if you worked closely with him, you could really see it. And that's the only time he would get frustrated. Like, whoa, we're here to talk serious, and he would have these convenings. And from these convenings, he would always, again, go around and be like, okay, now that we have the convening all day, what are you going to do? And he liked the convenings to be broad. So when we convened around attrition, we had pulpit rabbis and school principals and mental health professionals and lay leaders all coming together, to try to have this enriching conversation around this issue and come out with recommendations of things that could be tried. And then his ultimate goal was we should, come out with recommendations, pilot a few, see what works and doesn't work, tweak. Once you figured out what works, use the OU platforms to then scale that to the rest of the world and solve the problem, or certainly make a dent in the problem. That's how he approached these crises. And so, like we had this convening in around, let's say, single mothers. We had the challenges of single mothers. We had this convening. It was Rabbanim and it was Askanim and it was all sorts of different people who deal with this professionally, sister to sister, other organizations. And from that convening, he went to communities and spoke about the issue, convened Rabbanim locally around the issue. Rabbi Motzen led this with his Kol Echad initiative. We developed the Kol Echad initiative out of these convenings. The fact that OU needed a place dedicated to that space came out of this, and so much practically has emerged. Programs, initiatives, local things that no one will ever know about. And the last thing I would just say about this is he understood very well that the convening was under the OU, but whatever happened next had nothing to do with the OU. Whatever people would go back to their communities and do, they weren't going to get up and be like, well, now as a Rav, I'm going to speak about, what are the 5 issues that lead to attrition in our community. But before I do, I just want to thank the OU. Like, that wasn't going to be what happened. Like, and he didn't care at all. Like,
He wasn't staking an ownership claim. He just wanted
no,
to do what was best for Klal
no,
Yisrael.
correct, correct. He felt we were the right ones convene because also he felt, number one, the OU brings credibility to a convening. People are like, it's the OU, we eat their food. We might as well think about issues with them. That's number one. Number two, we have a broad brand and you could bring in, people to the left and people to the right, and you could bring them around the table. And when people ask them, like, what is this? You could be like, it's the OU, like, and he himself was able to do that. And yeah.
So much you said. One of the things, it always frustrated me because he would always say, "Well, I asked an Adam Gadol," or "An Adam Gadol told me this," and I kept, "Who? Who? You can't just leave me hanging." He always left me hanging unless I was in the room when the conversation happened, and I think it's because I assume, I can only speculate. It's because when you don't when you give them privacy and confidentiality, they'll speak freely and
Hmm.
tell you what's really on their mind.
100%.
If you're going to put their name out there, they have to think public perception, and this is not cynical. They have to think reality. What will be the implications if my name is associated with that opinion? How will it affect this part of the community? How will it affect that part of the community? At least tell me. I work for you. And then so I'd walk out of the room like, was it Rav Lopiansky? Was it Rav Asher Weiss? I still don't know.
You know how when you're in a conversation, a Shabbos table conversation or a hawk, not in the office because we're always working,
Never. Fast forward.
but and someone like brings something up, but like you have the scoop, like what really and you feel like this urge to be like, oh yeah, it was him, or oh, do you know what Rav Asher Weiss said about that, or because I never once saw Rabbi Hauer do that. Like, I've been in many meetings and many rooms where it was clear that he had more information, background information. I had conversations with him where I thought I was sharing something with him, which I found out later he knew more directly. And he never, like, showed his cards, so to speak. He didn't need credibility based on that. He never showed off his access. Some people always tell you, like, "Oh, I spoke to this one, I spoke to that one." Like, he didn't feel the need to do that. He really, you know the other thing I would say is that the there were a lot of reasons why these people trusted him. Partly it was that, was he really respected their privacy 100%. Partly was they saw tremendous authenticity, and they just saw that he wasn't in it for anything other than Klal Yisrael and Kadosh Baruch Hu. They saw that in him. Part of it was he didn't force the branding of the OU onto everything. So they
We
saw.
have programs here that are not branded OU.
Correct, correct,
Coming straight out of this office.
correct,
Nobody knows they're OU.
correct. And we have a director of marketing that has a lot to say about that. I have a lot to say about that. And I tell people around when I first got here, Rabbi Hauer is one of the people that brought me in. Rabbi Hauer and Josh brought me in. I worked with Josh at YU, and I came in, but I knew Rabbi Hauer from before. And the first time I discovered this, that there were programs and initiatives running in the community without an OU on them, so that people could kind of run them freely without the challenges that sometimes come with a brand. I told the people we were working with that to them, like, it was so simple. And I looked at them and I said, you're never going to work anywhere ever again in Jewish communal life that does this, ever. And I can't even imagine that this will go forever here. Like, I can't tell you how unique that is, like, grab it, love it, enjoy it, and run with it, because it's really antithetical to the way organizations are set up, which require the currency of relevancy and in order to solicit support to
Right,
fund their
they have
programs.
donors to answer to, they have a board to
Exactly.
answer, they have
Yeah.
bosses.
And everybody just goes to sleep at night being like, we did something special for Klal Yisrael in this community, and all right, so people don't know it's the OU. He had big plans for bigger things like this, where he had suggested something to me that he wanted to do, and it was like $250,000 project. He's like, yeah, we could help them, we could do it. I'm gonna go to the board. And I'm like, I can't see that working with an OU brand. And he's like, why does it have to have an OU brand? And I was like, I don't know because the money comes from the OU because we're in the OU. Like it was, But I want to say this, very, very important. It's not because he was embarrassed. He was so proud to be part of the OU, so proud of what the OU did, and he did have limits with this. I was involved with a program that we were going to get behind that would not have an OU brand. But there came a certain point where he felt like there was not enough covered in that space for other things that OU did, and he backed away. Like there were limits to this, but it was a very special thing that he had that he had people's trust. The other thing, the last thing I would say about building that trust, gave someone a mushel the other day because I just came off of a trip that we convened. This is one of the last really big projects that I was working on with Rabbi Hauer. We brought a group of Dati Lumi, Roshei Yeshiva, Dayanim, and Rabbanim to America and basically showed them the entire American Jewry in a week. And it would take a whole nother podcast to discuss
The goals still exist, and we
Yeah.
actually have communal infrastructures and great things going on here.
Exactly. It was a very shock. Half these people left Israel for the first time in their life. So this wasn't, this was eye-opening. And everywhere we went, from Lakewood to Art Scroll to YU to Square to Teaneck to Baltimore, everywhere we went and everyone we met had a personal relationship and kesher with Rabbi Hauer and had what to share about about that kesher, something specific, like not like I read an article in a magazine. I mean, magazines are amazing, but not, like
Be careful.
but like
Be careful.
something very specific, a personal connection.
Yeah.
And the way I explained it to somebody was the mushal. I don't know if this is true, but they say about medical research that if you point medical research only towards curing disease and problems, you will limit the expansiveness of discovery that you could achieve. Sometimes medical research needs to be pointed more generally just to better understand what's going on. And then you get surprised,
Right, yeah.
Something comes out of that you didn't expect. And there are many examples of great discoveries that did not happen because someone was trying to discover that cure or that medication or that treatment. It just came out tangentially. Rabbi Hauer invested in relationships not in a transactional way. He didn't just call people when he needed them or when they needed him. He connected with people fundamentally, and he would share with them in just more generalized experiences, thoughts, ideas, things that would come up. And so when an opportunity would emerge for something significant, like this trip did not happen because Rabbi Hauer called up the Rosh Yeshiva of Merkaz Arab and said, "Hey, I'm at the OU, do something that's like really great for Achdus." It happened because he developed relationships with people over time. He davened there a few times. He, went to learn there. He went to meet people. He sat with people. He talked about issues of the day. And so then opportunities emerge. And that's something I learned from him. In Jewish communal leadership, you think your time is at such a premium that you become very transactionally focused. Like I need a goal for this conversation, for this experience, for this moment. And I think like he had a whole nother side to his life where let's just be Jews, together in this shared space of living at Kadosh Baruch Hu's world and doing good things and lots of cures and treatments and moments came out of that. And you could see when he would interact with these Rabbanim, the people he would consult, you could see that the relationships had a depth to them that went much, much further than the actual issue we were discussing. You could see that like there was something there that was much more.
Going back to that mushal, it's something that you mentioned to me when I was having meetings with Rabbi Hauer, and I would schedule 60 minutes, and we wouldn't finish. And you told me, Never schedule 60 minutes, only 90 minutes. I didn't understand because whenever I'd go in and say, okay, here's what I want to talk about, he would say, hold on, let's look at the big view because he didn't want to just attack the subject and the solution. He wanted to talk about it and think about it and let's see what emerges because you never know when you talk about it more, you get different perspectives, different ideas. It was incredibly frustrating. But
He
he's right.
he told me
Brilliant.
many times, he did not think any meeting should be less than 90 minutes. Like, we would plan these convenings, and he'd be like, "Okay, so the first session's from 9 to 1, then we'll break for lunch." And I'm like, "What?" Like, yeah, he would just become subsumed, and many times I walked in with an agenda, and he had his notebook, and he would open it up, and I'd always try to, like, look over, trying to understand, like, what is he writing there but somehow, like, 3 scratches turned into, like, 8 things that he wanted to discuss. And yeah, he would always be expansive. We had meetings that were 3 hours. We had meetings that were longer. Come to Baltimore. We'll sit together in my house and we'll talk for half a day, a whole day. Like, no problem. Like, and he would make time for this. And this is what I mean by exactly what the connection you're making here. Like, because he didn't like narrowly just like, let's check off the list. When you left the office, you were trying to figure out, like, "Okay, so I have my next steps, like, what did I just do for 2 hours?" But it was enriching, and it was beautiful, and it was amazing, and I can't sit still as long as he can. Thank God sometimes he would get, like, a call in the middle, or he had to call his
Yes,
mother
always.
every day.
That was
Sometimes if
incredible.
that happened in the middle of the 90 minutes, I would get, like, a 5 or 10-minute break to, like, run around the office and do a couple laps and then go back in, but
I just want to go back to that and just he called his mother every single day,
momish.
and it was on a schedule. I had times when my meeting was after that call. The call went long, and everything stopped
Yeah,
while he was talking to his mother.
yeah.
It was beautiful. I don't call my mother every day.
Stepped out
I
of
should.
everywhere, stepped out of, yeah, and he stood up while he did it, and, he had something else on his schedule that also transcended everything. He had a chavrusa with one of his rabbeim, that was, like, once a week, also at a very specific time, and that also, he would say, basically, "I need a few minutes and get me out of the office," and he would learn. He would learn with him. Yeah, uh, he was very, I wanna tell you one of the things that he was very into. We had a parenting program, and the parenting program had a lot of layers to it. The layer that, like, would seem to be the most, I would say, like, seemed to be the lightest, like, there was, like, parenting courses, and there were videos, and there was a website, and there was a newsletter, like, lots of different pieces of it. It was called Gen Aleph. It's called Gen Aleph. Is something called Healthy Habits. Healthy Habits. What's a good healthy habit, you know? Don't bring your phone to family dinner. Have family dinner, once a week, twice a week, every day, whatever. Healthy habits. Rabbi Hauer held this to be the most important part of the parenting because classes, this thing, that thing, although his wife gave parenting classes and those he held of, those are transformative. But other than hers, okay, people take a class, like how much long-term impact, whatever, but a healthy habit, a good healthy habit, that he felt was very, very significant. And he had lots of these kinds of things that he layered into his life that I'm sure I don't know a fraction of. I'm sure his family knows many more, that just kind of were like these small sources of energy to him. And people have spoken about some of the psukim that were, on his wall. But he showed me once that on his desk, he had a sefer about kas. Sefer about anger, the meat of kas, how to conquer the meat of kas. He showed me this sefer. It's a whole sefer. He told me, learned it once, whatever. It's down the hall. It's still sitting on his
So
desk right now. It's still sitting on his desk. He told me he kept it on his desk just so that, sometimes he'd get an email or he'd see something that happened in the Jewish world or an employee would, do something about it. And he thought it was a healthy habit that sitting on his desk is 200 pages about gas. Not that he'd open it up and be like, how do I not get angry now? It's a healthy habit. Just have it on the desk. And it reminds you. So he had many of these like, kind of little minhagim, hanhagas, that I think like each one reflected a different piece.
I actually made a list of the 3 things that I saw him get angry about. Real anger, number 1, was a breach of Ikarei Emunah. I dealt with a lot of articles and things like that, a lot of intellectual stuff. Someone who should know better. I mean, he wasn't angry at a conservative Reform Jew or anything like that. They're coming from a different place. But someone who should know better, a Rav in Klal Yisrael who breaches
Who wrote
it hurt
something
him.
that,
It hurt him. It hurt him, and he would
yeah.
and we would talk about it, and we tried to smooth it over. And I'm a peacemaker. People who know me from the internet might not know that, but they think the opposite. I tried to make peace, but he would get angry,
Yeah.
and I respected that. I respect that lack of kavod for a community, for an individual, and especially for the Torah. Kavod Torah. Where's the kavod Torah? He would yell at me, and stuff that I wrote.
Right.
Where's the kavod Torah? Not saying he was right, but to him it was inexcusable to not show kavod to a community, a tzibur. You don't have to agree with him. He didn't agree with everything and everybody for sure. Didn't agree with me for sure, but you show kavod. And the third was a blatant lack of concern for the Jews in Israel, for what they're suffering. You don't have to agree with the politics, but the sympathy and the empathy for what they're going through. When he felt someone didn't feel that, he didn't understand. He didn't understand how you could be a Jew and not show concern for what our other Jews are going through. And his anger didn't last long, but he wanted action. He wanted to take action to reflect that we take these things very, very seriously.
100%. And as a result, he didn't just sit there and stew.
No.
He did something.
And my experience, usually Gil,
Yeah.
take care of that.
And sometimes he would send me an email that he was about to fire off. What do you think? Like, or a letter, to the community that he was about to send. What do you think? And I'd be like, oh, I don't know. This is such a good idea. But if it was on these issues, he would say something, and I could tell you, I'm only privy to it a few times. The people on the other end of this tochacha, of this rebuke, took it really seriously. And when I say seriously, I don't mean the way most people take criticism, where like you get defensive. They felt a need to explain themselves because they felt like a towering figure of morality and virtue has just called me out, and like I must have done something wrong. And on your last category, people who he felt did not have the right level of empathy for what the Jewish people were going through in Israel, or maybe they had too much empathy for other aspects of that experience. I was there when he fired off an email to such a person, a very, very illustrious, serious person, and he read me what he wrote to him, and I was flabbergasted. It was very strong. And I happened to be in the office late that night. This is someone from a different stream of Judaism. And I was in the office late that night, and not so late, like, I don't know, 8:30, 9 o'clock. And I walked by Rabbi Hauer's office, and there's the guy in his office. They're the two of them talking
Wow.
it out. And I was like, I never in my life seen anything like that. Like this person. Now, that didn't happen because this person read articles in the Jewish Action about Rabbi Hauer. That happened because Rabbi Hauer had developed a relationship with this person. This person and him had been in spaces enough times that he had developed a respect for Rabbi Hauer's integrity and thoughtfulness and who he was, that when he got this letter, and I'm sure they didn't come to a resolution about the issue. I'm sure of it. But he felt the need to drive to the OU, which we are an incredibly conveniently located Jewish organization here in Lower Manhattan, equally far from Brooklyn, Teaneck, Lakewood, But he and I remember I don't even know what they said to each other, but just the sight of the two of them in the office together. And I'm sure he didn't summon him. Like, when the rest of your midos are what Rabbi Hauer was,
that's key. That's the key.
then when these things are deployed, they're taken in that context. When we read certain things from certain people online or whatever, and they kind of build a reputation and a consistency of being critical and angry. So at a certain point, it dulls their ability to make an impact because you just like, okay, another angry article from this guy. Because it was so exceptional, it was he had a special way of, giving criticism. It was one thing he wanted to tell me to approach differently, like a more fundamental thing, not just like a specific issue. And I remember where it was for some reason. We were on a Zoom, and he said to me, has anyone ever shared with you the feedback that, and then he shared this feedback. And I was like, are you sharing that feedback? But he wouldn't be confrontational about it. He wouldn't be like, you should really be less whatever, which I would have taken, the cover gadol. But instead, it was like this roundabout, am I the first one to notice this? Because if I am, then maybe I'm off. But if other people notice this midah or this whatever, then, maybe it's something you want to take into consideration. And, yeah. But, there's also the parsha of him taking critique, and I watched that happen many times. He got a lot of emails and meetings and people telling him, as the head of the OU, I can't believe this and this shul and that shul and the OU this and the OU that. Took all of them seriously. He took all of them seriously.
I sent him some of those.
Yeah.
and he still hired me.
I didn't want to mention
He still hired me.
Gil, he loved you. Absolutely loved you. He was very, very proud that you came to. I remember saying to him, he's like, what do you think about Gil Student? And I was like, Gil Student would be amazing, but he's got a job. He's not coming to work at the OU. And he's like, I'm going to try. And I'm like, what? Any head of any HR department would have been like, hey, should we just do this? Should we just go into the for-profit sector and start picking off talented people and bringing them here? And and then you showed up and we were like, okay, I guess Rabbi Hauer got it. So
I don't know if you're in this meeting. I was in a meeting before I worked here. Rabbi Hauer announced that I was coming, and there was a Rosh Yeshiva sitting across from me, and he looked at me and said, I don't think he used this exact word. He's like, are you crazy? What are you going to do for Parnasa?
Right.
Baruch Hashem. It's, okay. We could go on for hours.
We could, and this is, it's helpful to talk about Rabbi Hauer.
Let's end with one question.
Yeah.
Based on your interaction with Rabbi Hauer, what do you think he would say? I mean, it's difficult to say what he would say, but maybe you even heard him say, what does the community need more of and what does it need less of?
He would say, I try to be careful not to say that in general. I'm in meetings now where there's a lot of Rabbi Hauer would want us to do this. He wouldn't want us to do that. And I try to be not to say things like that.
Okay, I'll stop. I'll stop doing that.
No. I try to say it to myself, but because it's important to know about a person, about an Adam Gadol, that, they're bigger than what we saw. And so, he had calculations that I'm sure I wasn't privy to. I'm sure others weren't privy to. Through this loss, I've connected with some of his family members more, appreciating other dimensions to him that I was not exposed to, and people who knew him from Baltimore and from his shul, a whole difference. I try to be careful not to whatever, but I would say the following. He definitely felt that the secret sauce of communal growth and elevation was Torah, study of Torah.
That's fair.
That's
fair.
Everything else we were doing was important. But at the end of the day, he definitely felt that, I heard him say this many times, because there was a video that circulated about the Yomi, which is part of this, but I heard him say it more expansively. He felt that it was his goal personally that the OU and others should make learning Torah so fundamental to being a frum Jew that, when people ask you, is this person frum? And is this person Orthodox? So we all have a small little list. Do they keep Shabbos? Do they keep Kashrus? They keep Taras Mishpacha? That's like the basic list, right? Ribbis, it's like, you're right, that's also part of Torah, but it's usually not on the list, that we're thinking about to define someone as Orthodox. He wanted Torah to be on that list. He wanted to be that lo yitachen, that you could define yourself as an Orthodox Jew if the regular study of Torah was not part of your life. So that's on the Aseh Tov, okay? On the other side of what we should stop doing is he really felt that we should talk to each other. We should talk to each other. And nobody should push to have to agree with each other. That was his big main yesod in the inter-conversations of the different ideologies. If your goal is he had very strong opinions during the war about different things.
Yeah.
And he wanted to broadcast those opinions and inspire and educate others in those opinions. But he wasn't looking to force his opinions, and it was incredibly important to him. All he wanted was that people should listen to each other and hear where each other was coming from. And it pained him greatly that what he would hear, even from groups that he sometimes would agree with, was so insensitive in the way it was formulated to other groups in Klal Yisrael. And he felt the reason for that is because they could not bring themselves to really listen and understand where others were coming from. And it's not a pluralistic approach. It's a conversational. And, without going into details, his actions and his legacy put people in rooms last week on this trip that no one else in the world, I think, could put in rooms. And all he wanted was to just listen to each other. Just listen to each other. And there are voices that don't even want that. They feel so strongly about and so entrenched, in what they believe that they don't even want to hear what the other one has to say. But he felt strongly that, like, we have to understand each other and we have to listen to each other. And there are beautiful parts of everybody's Yiddishkeit. And I'll just say it more explicitly. He felt that there were parts of the community that did not have a sufficient appreciation for the beauty of the world that prioritized Talmud Torah above all else.
Right.
And he felt that, like, not just they disagreed with how they were living, but they didn't appreciate, and the opposite. He felt that they didn't have appreciation for what was going on in these communities and some of the sacrifice he didn't want everybody to agree. He did not want everybody to agree. He just wanted everybody to listen to each other. That's all. That's why he didn't like declarations. I never saw him sign anything, Like,
I was in a room with him. You weren't there. When someone from a very, very different community said the Orthodox Jewish community leaders, the rabbis, need to issue a declaration on this and this. And he said, Rabbi Hauer said, well, let's do something more meaningful. And he offered some suggestions. And this person from a very different community said, maybe it's not meaningful for your community, but for our community, we care a lot about it. But he is a non-Jewish leader. So Rabbi Hauer was thinking, in our community, a Kol Koreh, nobody cares.
right.
Nobody believes it, first of all, the signatures, and it has no impact whatsoever. It's not meaningful. But in that person's community, it was meaningful.
Yeah.
So and then when Rabbi Hauer heard that, and I talked to him about it afterwards, he said, "Oh, okay. Then maybe it's worthwhile doing if it actually makes an impact. But in our community, we tell ourselves we did something, but we didn't actually do anything."
And that was his, that was his 100%. That was his focus. He thought the yelling at each other was not. And it's ironic because he led this massive organization, but his shita was that he wasn't so into, like, the co-organizational branding of stuff. Like, I would get calls all the time. Well, the OU put their logo on this. The OU put their logo on that. I mean, Howard was always like, we put our logos on things that we run, and we could be helpful in other ways. And, um, he felt that the Achdus in Klal Yisrael ultimately comes from people talking to people. not from organizations talking to organizations. He respected the fact that organizations, in their composition and in their function, had to be loyal to their principles and to their priorities. And he wasn't looking for another organization with a different set of principles and a different set of priorities to sign on to what he was doing. He really wasn't. And others would always run around, oh, the OU and the Aguda should do a we don't need the organizations on the flyer. Klal Yisrael is going to daven. You know what I'm saying? We're all daven. Like he always felt like people can make shalom. People could talk to people. And when you break down those barriers, then those people, as they go back into their organizations, will interface with the other organizations differently, because now they're not talking to some abstract construct of Jewish life, but they're talking to people. And they have a deeper appreciation for those people. And I watched that happen.
So one of the articles I published in memory of Rabbi Hauer was about how when he disagreed, he did it in an agreeable way. He was able to disagree without alienating, so someone reached out to me in response saying, during the 2020 election, COVID was happening. There was massive polarization. Everybody was angry at everybody else. There was just anger everywhere. And Rabbi Hauer convened, or on Zoom, 3 people plus him, to try to find a solution on how we could get people to talk to each other rather than at each other.
Mhm.
How do we? And it was basically an impossible task. But I told the other person, I was one of the 3 people. It was you, me, and this other person.
Right.
But the Rabbi Hauer, there was this cultural wave of anger and polarization, and he wanted to solve that. At least in our community, I personally, I didn't think there was any solution. We came out of there with no good answers. I don't know if there was a good answer at that time. Sometimes you just can't fight these massive trends. But that's what he thought big. But he was so concerned about people not talking to each other.
Right.
We could disagree without hating each other.
Yeah. He, for Yom HaZikaron, he came to us with this idea that we should make a video connection with a yeshiva. I think the yeshiva was in Ely. Is that correct? I don't remember 100%. Anyway, this yeshiva had lost a number of students in the war.
Yes.
And I was trying to understand, what shaykhus does this yeshiva have to the OU? What shaykh, and so whatever, there was a group that was trying to decide, should we do this? Should we not do this? Nimnu v'gamru, we didn't have the money in the budget to make another movie. There were a lot of things that we were trying to do. And so Rabbi Hauer went and raised the money on his own, gave it to the yeshiva. They made the video. Once they had the video, he brought it back to us. He's like, it was a very inspiring video. And it became the OU program for, that was a typical, and it became very clear that he had relationships in this yeshiva and he had been there and they knew him and he knew them. And, very often there was this unspoken, is a little bit of a vulnerable thing to share. There was this unspoken, awkwardness that, here I was coming from the YU world and he was coming from the Ner Yisrael world, and he had developed closer relationships in the Dati Leumi community than I had. So he would mention people and I'd be like, and he's like, oh yeah, I just met with him when I was in Eretz Yisrael. And I'd be like, who is that? And then, there's some major thinker and major, he just, he had that ability by connecting with people, and that was a koch of seeing godless in people.
Yeah, I remember he had this one political commentator come to a board meeting and just talk about the situation and his predictions about how Israeli society is moving along.
Right.
And Rabbi Hauer started as I read his newsletter every morning. I'm sure you guys do too. I was like, who is this guy? Now that I know his name, I see he's everywhere, and he is a big guy.
I was at that board meeting, and I also had no idea who that was. And Rabbi Hauer, now there's a piece of me that wishes I had Rabbi Hauer's email reading list, because he would forward articles from the most random places And like, he also read everything carefully. Like, sometimes you'd send something out, okay, like, and you'd get back like 3 questions, and you're like, you're the head of the OU. You're like really reading our, women's initiative recap email on the learning of Daniel that took place. And like, yeah, like it was, but he read a lot of thought pieces, and he was holding, in a lot of this stuff.
So the meeting when he offered me a job, so I knew we had a meeting. He gave me some reading in advance, and I thought he just wanted to hear my opinions on the reading. So I go there, and I did the reading, and he asked me for my opinions, and I gave him my opinions, and we generally agreed, and I pointed out some things that the OU did that I wasn't happy with, and he also wasn't happy with it as well. And then we started talking about me coming to work here full time, and I'm thinking, well, why did he just spend so much time making me read this stuff?
Right.
And then I still don't know why he did that, except that that's what he did. That's what he enjoyed doing, reading all these things and then thinking about it and critiquing and thinking how to improve the community.
Yeah. When you sat with him and met with him, so because he was so thoughtful and his ideas were often well developed and thought out, so sometimes you felt a pressure to like do the same. That like we're just having our weekly meeting, which is still on my calendar because I can't get myself to pull it off the calendar. It's actually today. And what I decided to do with that. But, we're just having a weekly meeting. We're supposed to just like be catching up. And he'd be like, and all of a sudden you're trying to think of like, okay, can I think of something really smart to say about like data collection, like, and the problem is that in many meetings you go to where like, you're going around the table and everyone's trying to make a contribution that's thoughtful and significant. And you feel like you have to say something. So first of all, he was never like that. Like he was happy not to say something, unless it was serious and thoughtful. But like you have to be very careful not to just like hawk something out, because he would then pull it apart. He would be like, well, what do you mean by that? Well, like, what are the implications of that? Well, how does that, work with, like you'd say something about YU and you'd be like, well, what about this Rosh Yeshiva? And what about that? And did that happen? What about that? And you're just like, like, we're just schmoozing. We're not writing a Jewish Action article. But there was that, because he was thoughtful. So sometimes you felt like a pressure, many times I would go in for a meeting, I would spend time preparing, not just like what we're going to talk about, but like, okay, do I have something thoughtful to say about about some of these things? Because you knew that like, that's the nature of the conversation. I have to say a lot of what I've been sharing with you, I don't even think I had a full awareness of while it was happening. A lot of it is just coming from reflecting over the last month, especially conversations like this, and just thinking about a lot of what's missing, But like we had a very normal collegial relationship. It was great. It was just great. And, I have a shul, so my Erev Yontif is usually really busy. And on Erev, I don't remember if it was Erev Rosh Hashanah or Erev Yom Kippur, I left him I wanted to call him, but I was nervous that I wouldn't have time because I had so much going on and so much prep going on. So I left him a voice note, which I'm glad I left, which was one of these like general, like, Erev Rosh Hashanah, I appreciate you voice notes. And
say that like it's a normal thing, but maybe it is. I don't know.
Okay. And then
I'm gonna be looking for one next time.
right. And then he wrote back, I want to speak to you. I don't want to do this by voice note. And he called, and I of course missed the call, but then I called him back, and then we had a beautiful like Erev Yontif Chizuk conversation. And like it wasn't okay with him to leave a voice note. You know what I mean? Like and I remember this was before I would know, God forbid, that any of this would ever happen, that we would lose him. And, I remember like stopping and saying to myself, like he's so busy. Like his voice notes, like he's got a huge family, Baruch Hashem. He's got a kihila. He's got all his employees. He's got all his everything. And like he could have just been Yotze with 30 seconds. Like that's all he needed to do or for his voice notes, maybe a minute and a half, 2 minutes, That's it. That's all you needed to do. But like there was a regish that was just very beautiful. Anyway, it's a big
So
loss.
I don't want this conversation to end for multiple reasons. We also had more we were going to talk about, but I think we're going to have to push that off to another time. I just want to thank you, Rabbi Glasser, very much for coming on and sharing and spending this vulnerable time with me. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. We appreciate you. And it's a big loss, but it's also a big achrayus. It's a big achrayus. And the last thing I'll say is sometimes, I didn't realize all of these details that we've spoken about today, but I did know that he was special while it was happening. I wasn't like, oh my gosh, now he's gone. And like, I didn't realize I did know. And I was very grateful. Yeah, there were challenges also as a human being. It's important to know that.
I still don't agree with everything that he wanted us to do and said.
Yeah.
And I don't think he would want me
No, not at all.
to agree.
Not at all. Not at all. We kibitz back and forth about different things. Like I was saying to my wife, I don't know if we'll leave this in, but I was saying to my wife that there have been countless articles about him. So many, Mishpacha's like still running articles about him. Like it's like people can't let go, and videos and tributes and this and that. I said, how many have been any on his management skills? So that was where we worked together. I worked through, different aspects of serving Klal Yisrael together, But Baruch Hashem, we had a gift, and we have an achrayus to move things forward.
Very often, the person who has the ideas is not the person to manage the whole team.
Mm-hmm.
You need different people
for sure
to be pushing in different directions.
Yeah.
Otherwise, let's say the operations guy is just going to get it done.
Right.
And it's just going to get done, which is not what you want.
Yeah.
You want it thoughtful, meaningful, done right. And you need to have those two people. I think Rabbi Hauer was, I don't know if he was comfortable in that role, but he happily took it on because he wanted it done right.
Yes, and that was a huge piece of him. He wanted things done right. Yeah. He had high expectations of himself first and of everybody around him, but he was compassionate. He had high expectations, but he was a compassionate person. He didn't make you feel bad, And he appreciated growth. He gave people the chance to grow. A compliment from him was like gold. That's what I'm saying. Because, you felt like, he'd be like, oh, that's a great idea. And you'd be like, finally, I had a great idea. Meant.
He was good at tearing down ideas.
Meant a lot.
Because and not in a nasty.
No.
He tried to do it as gentle as he could, but he wanted it done right.
Yeah. But I got to a point where his body language betrayed, I could tell, at the beginning of the idea, this was not happening.
He was not good at masking that. Yeah. Okay, Rabbi Glasser. Yaakov, thank you very much.
This was a pleasure, Gil. And Be'ezus Hashem, we'll talk more about Jewish action, but should have many more years of the chance to impact and influence the Jewish world, the Jewish community, and to bring ideas like the ones of Rabbi Hauer to the Jewish world and to the broader world, and to make a difference.
Amen. So I hope people will subscribe and will rate our podcast highly and share it with other people, and follow us on social media.
Yeah, and make your live Substack of Jewish actions in the corner of your house, so you could build your collection and always come back to them over the years.
We have this thing called a website.
Yes,
people might want to check it out. JewishAction.com.
Yeah, but there's something to curling up with a Jewish action.
It's like Shabbos and Yom Tov. Okay,
you need a cup of coffee to fully internalize all these ideas. It's not for a subway. It's also for the subway. but it's,
You could drink a cup of coffee in front of your computer. It has happened before.
Not if you were born in the 1970s.
Okay, thank you very much, Rabbi Glasser.
Take care.
Thank you for joining us. The next episode is going to be a continued conversation with Rabbi Glasser about the 40th anniversary of Jewish Action. Please remember to follow this podcast and follow us on social media. Thank you, and until next time.